Gardner, Kansas. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Good evening. Night. Good time to be indoors doing this. All right. We have two presentations this evening. The first is from AAA Community Traffic Safety Award presentation. Chief.
Mayor, council members, thank you. AAA Community Traffic Safety Award is presented to communities and their dedicated work towards traffic safety. Here tonight to present the Gardner Police Department with their award is Kansas Department of Transportation Law Enforcement Liaison Bob Hamilton. Bob works with our department with all kinds of different programs and grant money that we can get to attack traffic safety. He is also a retired member from the Johnson County Sheriff's Office as well. And here to accept the award on the police department's behalf is Sergeant Dave Rolfe, who is our facilitator of the traffic safety unit. And Bob, it's all yours.
Well, it's kind of nice to get introduced as a past police officer because most of them, they ask me if I'm the Bob Hamilton that's a plumber, and I said no. So I'm proud to be here again, Mr. Mayor, City Council, Chief, to present the Gardner Police Department with the Silver Award for their actions for traffic safety, which includes click it or ticket, you drink, you drive, you lose. We started a new program 2 years ago, aggressive and inattentive driving, which is to hit the people out here that I guess they can't read when it says 65 or 70 out here on our speed limit, on our highways. So, and your agency has signed up again for that this year, which will start April 1st. I always like to brag on law enforcement a little bit. I don't know how many of you paid much attention to the news here the last week, or two. State of Missouri lost 3 law enforcement officers to shootings. Pennsylvania lost 2 state troopers yesterday or today in a traffic crash where they were trying to help a gentleman that was out on the highway, and a suspected drunk driver hit him and killed both of them. Everybody thinks all they do is sit around and drink coffee and sit and talk to each other. But when law enforcement is needed, they respond. And here in Johnson County, I think we all need to feel pretty confident because you don't hear much complaints from law enforcement in this metropolitan area, which is a good thing. Also, our fatality numbers are up again this year. I haven't seen anything this week yet, but as of last Monday, I think we were up, well, we lost 64 people, and I know we lost some more over the weekend. So fatality numbers are going up. Crashes are going down, but our fatality numbers are going up, and quite a few of them are because they're not wearing their seat belts, which is required to do. So, Mr. Mayor, City Council, I want to thank you too for supporting your police department, because without your help, they couldn't get out here and do what they needed to do. So at this time, I'd like to present the Silver Award to the Gardner Police Department, Sergeant Wall.
Thank you, Sergeant Rolfe. Did want to point out Mark Baldwin is joining us through Zoom. Mark, can you hear us okay? Okay, great. He's on mute. Okay. All right. Okay, our next presentation is with Matt Wolf, 2021 end of year financial report. Finance Director Matt Wolf.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. It's an important part of the budgeting process to review the financial health of the city. Tonight I will be presenting the unaudited year-end financial report for 2021. In general fund, revenues were favorable to estimate by 6.8%, or basically $1 million. Expenditures were favorable to estimate by 4.1%, or $604,000. And when I refer to estimate, I'm referring to the revised 2021 budget. Fund balance was favorable to estimate by, it was 50% compared to, we budgeted 37%. In 2021, ending fund balance was just over $7.1 million. Approximately $2 million higher than the prior year, and about $1.6 million higher than budget. This slide kind of provides more detail on the revenues. Property tax was up about 4.8%. City and county sales and use tax was up about 11%, or $660,000. Franchise fees were down about 3.7%. License and permits were favorable by about 14.2%. Charges for services were unfavorable by about 4%. Court fines and fees were up about 14%. And other miscellaneous line items like grants, alcohol tax, and other ones kind of combined to have about a $229,000 favorable variance. One thing that was kind of interesting about city, county, and sales and use tax, there was a little bit of a switch. Like last year, city sales and use tax outpaced county sales and use tax. This year, city sales and use tax was about 8.8%. County sales and use was over 14.5%. Gardner's strong performance the last 2 years is driven by our mix of businesses. Our groceries, our fast food, convenience stores all perform well during even tough economic times. The county's strong performance is likely due to customer confidence going back up and increased spending on non-essentials. Also, there was quite a bit of stimulus going around 2021 that probably boosted some numbers as well. Court fines and fees are up mainly due to increased enforcement of truck traffic, and because court is still working through a large backlog that was created during the pandemic. This report kind of shows historical actual trends for revenues. It also breaks it out by kind of major revenue sources, so you can see how our revenues are diversified. You can see sales and use tax is the largest revenue source for the general fund. It's also becoming larger over time. This does put us somewhat at risk just because it is a more volatile revenue source. Sales and use tax can drop pretty quickly, which means we'd have to take immediate budget action. It's also important to understand such an important revenue source on how we expect it to perform in the future and what kind of goes into it. One major thing to look at is trade pull factors. So essentially, trade pull factors estimate how much how much people spend on goods and services in the community. If you have a trade pull factor of 0.7, that basically means for every dollar they spend, they're spending 70 cents in your community. The other 30 cents is leaking out to other communities. So if you're above a trade pull factor of 1, that means you're actually taking in more revenue from other places around you. Gardner is typically historically a bedroom community, so we tend to have some sales tax leakage. What's interesting though is in 2019 it went up to 0.74, 2020 it went up to 0.79, in 2021 it went up to 0.82. It's a very positive trend. For general fund expenditures, they were favorable to estimate by about $604,000. Primarily that was due to personnel savings. We knew we had some vacancies in 2021, and that was the bulk of the budget savings that we experienced. There were some savings in contractual services as well. about 290,000. Then we had some unfavorable variances in commodities of 124,000, and a collection of miscellaneous line items for about 29,000. The commodities isn't surprising as well because we did have quite a bit of inflation. We knew some costs were going up. Overall, the variance of 604,000 is out of a total budget of about 14.8 million. This kind of shows the expenditures over time in the general fund. Due to the pandemic in 2020, the economic forecast was grim. The city took immediate action and implemented a $1.2 million in budget cuts. So you can see how the total expenditures dipped down in 2020, but in 2021, the expenditure levels returned closer to 20, or just above 2019 levels. Overall, the city has held the line in regards to expenditures over the past 3 years. In 2020, our fund balance is 5.1 million. We estimated that we'd end around 5.5. With the strong revenues and budget savings, we ended at 7.1. In the electric fund, revenues were favorable by about 10.8% or 2.5 million. Expenses were unfavorable by 7% or 1.82 million. Please note it's that winter event, the polar vortex event, dramatically inflating both operating expenditures and operating revenues. We got invoices over the course of last year. Some were immediately after the event, some were all the way into August or even November. So the estimated budget built in the known costs, but there were some unknown ones that popped up that caused these variances. There was also some savings in capital outlay. We didn't do the new substation submetering project. It was canceled due to KCP&L having spacing constraints that wouldn't allow the project to happen. We also had Prairie Trace electric infrastructure improvements, which is cash funded. That's going to be crossing over into 2022. So we had some savings in 21, but those are temporary because we'll be finishing the project this year. You can see the fund balance basically ended at 13.6 million compared to what we estimated at 12.9. And then we have another $3.1 million in electric capital reserve fund. This slide shows both the revenues and expenditure trends over the last 3 years. The 2020 debt proceeds were for the smart meter project, same with the 2020 capital outlay. But what's important to notice on this is 2021 revenues and operating expenditures seem considerably higher than prior years. That's once again the polar vortex event causing about $7 million in additional expenditures that you can see in the bright green area of the 2021 expenditure graph. In the water fund, revenue was unfavorable by about 1.67 million, and expenses were favorable by about 649,000. The revenue variance is almost entirely due to the timing of GO bonds for the Prairie Trace water line extension. Please remember we paid Water 1 basically to extend the Prairie Trace water line. We paid them $1.7 million that appears as a contractual service payment in our operating budget, but we're waiting until this year to issue debt, so we'll reimburse ourselves this year. What that means is, okay, we ended 2021 with an ending fund balance of 2.36 million compared to where we expected to be 3.38. Once you add in that $1.7 million, we're actually closer to 4 million. The favorable variance and expenditures was mostly due to personnel and contractual services. And once again, the commodities went slightly over budget. So we're seeing cost increases in commodities across the board. Stop. It shows the revenues and expenditure trends for water. You can see the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant Expansion Project. We encumbered the contract in 2019. We got debt proceeds in 2020. But one important thing to point out is our revenues in 2021 ended around 6.5 million. If you look at 2021, the kind of annual operating expenditures and debt service are outpacing it. The annual expenses are kind of inflated by that 1.7 for the Water 1 payment. And the debt service, you can see the bright green is growing compared to prior years, and that's due to the debt service for Hillsdale coming online. We do have a plan in place to basically close this gap. We've had a long-term plan of basically using a combination of water fund balance, planned water rate increases, which was 3.7% each year for 10 years. And this, I think we started that in 2020. And then additional revenues from development will continue to come in, which will help close that gap between revenues and expenditures over time, and also accommodate other capital projects on the horizon. In the wastewater fund, we had revenue that was unfavorable by about 3.85 million, and expenses favorable by about 2.36 million. And our ending fund balance was actually negative 384,000. And the reason we were able to do that is council approved the project and debt authorization for Prairie Trace Sanitary Sewer Improvement Project. And once again, it was a kind of a timing issue with the GEO bonds. We're planning to issue GEO bonds for the sewer component of this project this year as well. So we've spent about $2.3 million already on the Prairie Trace project, and last year we'll reimburse ourselves this year. They'll go straight to fund balance. That would put the fund balance approximately $2 million. This shows the revenues and expenditures for wastewater over time. If you exclude debt proceeds, wastewater revenues have been fairly flat over the last 3 years. And development revenues have been slow the last 2 years just due to the pandemic. We expect that to pick up. Also note, 2021, we lowered the transfers in from the water fund. Water fund has traditionally subsidized the wastewater fund, but even back when we did the rate study several years ago, it was determined that we were going to try and phase out those transfers from water to the wastewater fund. So 21 reflects that transfer dropping from 1 million to 500,000. Wastewater fund expenditures are growing faster than revenues. The primary reason for this is we've increased our investment in our I&I program, which will increase our capacity. A significant chunk of the wastewater budget goes towards existing debt, the bright green area on the graphs. It was approximately 2.7 million in 2021. I do have some good news though. Last year was our last payment for the Kill Creek Resource Recovery Facility. So that was for 1.5 million. So going forward, the existing debt service will drop considerably. The remaining debt service would be for the South Lift Station storage tank and also Big Bull Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant and Lift Station. Between the reimbursements for the Prairie Trace project, the development revenues coming in, and also the lower debt service, the wastewater fund is adequate for covering existing operations and basically current debt service. An overall summary is general fund is above 30% target at 50%. Electric fund is robust despite the polar vortex event. Water fund is adequate. Wastewater fund needs further discussion because it is struggling to keep up with anticipated capital costs and planned debt service. Operating revenues have been flat for recent years, and the capital costs are increasing significantly since the last master plan update. I'll present a CIP update to the governing body next month. This will set the stage for more engaged discussion regarding infrastructure and financial planning. This is a look at the upcoming budget calendar. In April, we have CIP presentation and outside agency requests. Then in May, we'll have the budget policy, kind of go over kind of cost drivers and new updates on revenue, and also just get general direction from council on how they want to develop the budget. June 15th, the county will share the revenue neutral rate with us. June 20th, we'll develop a draft budget for review. But by July 5th, we'll kind of need to have some direction on where the governing body wants to go regarding the revenue neutral rate. Then after that, the budget adoption process will vary depending on that decision. That concludes my presentation. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Matt. Questions from council?
All right. I guess I'll reach the tough questions here about wastewater. We know that we've got big projects. We're going to talk about the CIP next time we have a meeting, but that's going to be a big issue going forward. How are we going to juggle? I know we're phasing out the transfers out of water in order to make the wastewater, more accurately reflect what our revenues versus expenses pictures are. But unless we're looking at like a massive increase in wastewater rates, we're not going to be able to make those numbers work. And that's a concern for all of us, I think. Understanding that we do have additional capacity we have to build into the system going forward. So I know you're starting to talk about some plans. Can you or Jim kind of fill us in as to what the options might be?
Absolutely. One, we're still trying to identify the best approach for the capital investment, and they'll kind of dictate the different scenarios we can run for financing. And it's not just, you're right, it's going to be a large undertaking for the wastewater fund. So we are looking at kind of the true cost of government for households, just to see how can we basically either mitigate the rate increase in wastewater or offset it in other ways to basically negate some of the impact to homeowners. And one of the considerations is also that subsidy from the water fund. Of course, we'll take a look at that as well.
So we did get the last technical memo from GBA. There were some assumptions in there that they used to base some of their projections and calculations that we asked them to revise. There's no reason for us to be looking 80 years out and an increase in population of over 100,000 at this point. So we were backing off some of those numbers and looking at something more realistic for the next 20, 30 years. So they're working on that now, and once we have a chance to review it and go over it with them, then we'll bring that to council to update the picture that we got first in 2017 with the wastewater master plan, and then a couple years ago when we looked at the option between expanding Kill Creek and the South Wastewater Treatment Plant. So there's a number of things that, we've talked about mitigating some of the rise in wastewater rates with backing off some of the electric rate, or just a combination of things. We can subsidize it with electric fund, water fund, or even the general fund if it comes to that for us to meet our needs.
Well, that's the other piece of my question. So we have a general fund, a very robust general fund. We have to have some discussions also about what's going to happen in 3 years with regard to the special sales tax. Okay, what we're going to be doing with regard to other infrastructure in the community, specifically Parks and Rec. We have serious issues, deficiencies within our Parks and Rec system. And 3, we've got to start figuring out, given what's happening right now with inflation and with cost of living increases and everything else, we're starting to get into a wage price spiral a little bit. How are we going to manage our mill going forward next 3 years? It's going to be very, very difficult. This is stuff that's going to have to be juggled. So
we are looking at, in a more comprehensive manner, our deferred maintenance and some of the things that in the past we haven't budgeted for. Several years ago, there was no budget for the maintaining our streets. So that's why we went to sales tax. We have the same issue with shelter houses, with our trails, with sidewalks in front of City Hall, with City Hall itself that needs some updates. So we're gonna look at that and present all that information to the council so you can make an informed decision on how we put together this next budget.
It is great to see the work that we've done to this point and the position we're in now, but moving forward, you're right, there's going to be expenses and concerns, and what a good budget is all about process.
I did have a question if you're done. Can you remind me what's going on with the COVID relief funds? I know there were strict
Yes.
rules and et cetera, what they could be spent for, and I don't remember. Have we finalized that, or?
So
We
the
have-
consensus was when we got our first payment, because it was split into two.
Right.
We got the first one, I believe, in July of last year. The consensus is that we were going to hold on to that until we get the second half.
Okay,
And that we would likely use that for our wastewater infrastructure.
okay,
Because there's a number of things in wastewater that, whether it's relief lines or doing things within our current system, that we need to do in the very near term.
we hadn't really mentioned it in a while, and it really didn't address this in this presentation. So I just wanted to make sure it was
Yeah, it hasn't been spent. It's been.
still out there, and we were still working on what we were gonna spend it on, et cetera.
And just so council's aware, we followed what's considered best practice and placed it into a special revenue fund so it didn't get commingled with other funds.
Okay.
So we're
That's-
just sitting on it for now.
That's what my question was. It's off books basically for
Yep.
the general fund or the special, the utility fund. So
Okay.
it's just sitting out there in escrow someplace.
And do we have the whole total, or do we only know the first amount, or do we know?
We had about 1.6 last year, and there will be another 1.6.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Council?
Seeing a fund balance like we have, would anybody be interested in discussing an extra 1% COLA for the non-police officer city employees?
Oh, no, we were thinking it. And I talk about wage price spirals, that's kind of what I was getting at, is that we're already starting to see significant.
No, I was on the city website today. We have 10 open positions that aren't, or listed, that aren't police officers. I know it was discussed at the last meeting that we don't have an issue hiring non-police officers, but with 10 open positions, it made me wonder, which I don't know if they've been open for a while or not a while, but I know 1% isn't a lot, but it's something.
Well, I know last meeting, the information we had was just, it was robust.
Right.
So at least we have numbers now.
Solid numbers now.
Right.
We want to bring back numbers with that 1%.
We can.
Next meeting.
Yeah, let's do that.
Sound good? Mark?
What are your thoughts, Mark?
I'm just watching for that little peak.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. My thoughts are that we can look at that. Casey's suggestion, I recommend that as Matt's bringing forth all the CIP projects, that we see everything that's on the table, particularly knowing what wastewater is going to be, and then we can look at it from a priority standpoint of what we want to do, long term, but also just this year.
Correct.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions, concerns?
Nope. Thanks for turning that around so quick, Matt. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Now time for public comments. Members of the public are welcome to use this time. Make comments about city matters or items on the agenda that are not part of a public hearing. Please limit your time to 5 minutes. There's a clock on the left. No profanity, no personal attacks. That being said, please come forward, state your name and address for the record. Podium's all yours. Anyone? No one coming forward. We'll move to consent agenda. Is there a councilperson who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull number 4.
Is there a motion for consent agenda items number 1, 2, 3, and 5?
So moved.
Motion Shute, second Deaton. And we approve consent agenda items 1, 2, 3, and 5. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstained? Consent agenda item number 4, consider authorizing the execution of a service contract with Denali Water Solutions LLC for the Hillsdale Wastewater Treatment Plant Waste and Residuals Pond Cleanout.
Okay,
Water.
so I know that there is a line in the packet that says that utility staff reviewed the apparent low bid provided by Denali Water Services and determined to meet or exceed the specified requirements. They're $203,000 less than the next bid. I mean, I know that we have that line in there, but we're not. I mean, it just seems like maybe their bid didn't have the whole scope or something. Can anybody talk to that? Or I'm worried that, I mean, that seems like a big difference to me.
Denali, they performed the same clean out in 2021, and it was for $56,000.
Okay.
So their bid of 64 seems reasonable based on the previous bid.
Okay.
I assume, I mean, we laid out the scope of services needed, and they've met those.
Correct. They have.
So Gons, I know these are sealed bids and everything, and I don't want you to speculate or anything, but it did seem kind of weird that the other 3 bids that we got were so much higher than Denali's. It was just because of familiarity with our system? Is it because of the fact that they were looking at their personnel costs and materials costs differently than Denali, or what?
I don't have the details, but I know that Nutriject system, they're from Iowa.
Yeah.
So they have to mobilize from Iowa to Kansas.
Well, this group is from Arkansas. So
Yeah.
I mean,
And the same thing will be from Arkansas. We'll have to mobilize from.
isn't Denali from Arkansas who we picked?
I don't have the details, but what I'm saying is the bid they gave us is similar to the bid they gave us a year ago.
All right.
Okay.
Wait, so we previously had a contract for this service, and the contractor backed out or refused to do the work
Okay.
because they were so busy. So these guys stepped in and did it, so that may be it too, that the other ones bid that high because of the demand.
Okay.
So,
Makes sense.
Okay.
And they did a tremendous job. I mean, they really did a good job on the lagoons. So I'm
all for it, low bid, et cetera, but it just
Yeah.
seemed like there was such a discrepancy
Mhm.
between the next highest bid. So, okay, I'm good if you guys are good.
I'm good.
Okay.
Is there a motion for that?
So moved.
Second.
Motion Robert, second Deaton. We consider authorizing the execution of a service contract with Denali Water Solutions for the Hillsdale Water Treatment Plant waste and residuals pond clean out. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Abstain. Sorry, Mark. Abstain.
Mark was in favor, I think.
Yes, he was. Consent agenda item number 4 passes. Planning and zoning consent agenda. Is there a councilman like to remove an item from that agenda? Okay, that passes as well. We have to vote.
Probably need to
Sorry. Is there a motion? Sorry.
So moved.
Motion Potter, second Deaton.
Yeah.
That we approve the planning and zoning consent agenda. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Wait.
Aye.
Abstain. Planning and zoning consent agenda passes. Yeah. All right. Moving on. New business. Item number 1. Consider adopting an ordinance amending Chapter 2.50 of the Gardner Municipal Code relating to municipal court. Amy Foster.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Thank you. I'm just here for housekeeping. I was good at housekeeping, getting rid of some outdated information. And so I'll kind of go through some of the most noted changes. One of them being that all monies that go through municipal court and the police department will be receipted and then deposited through the fiscal services division versus the city clerk, which is how it has been for probably 20 some years, but just cleaning up some good stuff. The next notable change is the appointment of public defenders, which you'll notice was actually on the consent agenda, so thank you for passing that. In the past, those were assigned by the judge, and we would have a number of those, and then they would invoice us and on an hourly rate. With that, then we would have to go through their statements, make sure that, you know, they were thorough with how they handled defendants. So this will allow us to name 2 public defenders that will bill us on a monthly basis. So it'll just be a flat rate, and we'll only have 2 that we'll assign to each of our new prosecutors. So thank you. The next piece was to remove the piece that stated that the municipal judge would attend the monthly city council meetings to give you a report of court activities. I know that that has not happened for 21 and some odd years. And she has asked that you please make sure to consider removing that. So the next piece is the removal of the acceptance of valid driver's license in lieu of cash or surety bonds. That is not a practice that we have upheld as well. Most generally, that happens in much smaller areas as kind of a, we'll hold your driver's license and then you come back and see us when we have court. We are big enough that that would just take individual manpower to manage that record keeping and track all of those driver's license, plus the security of that. So we're asking to remove that as well. We're asking to remove in its entirety the failure to comply. Municipal court does not issue a new violation for a failure to comply. We actually take the citation, it becomes a failure to appear, give them a 30-day notice, and then it goes directly to warrant on the initial citation. So we do not issue a new citation for that. And then those were the big changes, and then there was just some grammar, punctuation, cleanup that we did throughout the whole municipal code for municipal court. So we'd just like to ask the governing body to pass Ordinance 2728, cleaning up the Gardner Municipal Code regarding municipal court.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy. Any public comment? Public comment. Council, questions, comments, concerns?
I found it funny that you put housekeeping in the beginning of the ordinance. That's very nice. I like that.
I know
Yes,
you guys always like housekeeping.
Yes, yes.
Do we get a report from the municipal judge? Do they keep it written yearly or any?
We submit them to the state.
Okay.
And so we don't actually, you guys kind of get it more in the idea of fines and fees, money collected. But yes, we do submit a report July 1st to the state and then one December 31st of everything that we've done, so.
Do you think it's something that we might want?
I mean, if you're doing it, submitting it to the state, is that something that can be submitted to us? Just, I mean, she doesn't have to come here, make a report.
Yes, yes, we could definitely provide you that information.
Yeah.
It is quite interesting, actually, so.
Second.
Motion Potter, second. Deaton, that we adopt ordinance number 2728, an ordinance of the city of Gardner, Kansas, amending chapter 2.50 of the Gardner Municipal Code relating to municipal court. City clerk, please call roll.
Councilmember Roberts,
Yes.
Councilmember Shute,
Yes.
Councilmember Van Potter,
Yes.
Councilmember Baldwin,
Yes.
Councilmember Deaton,
Yes.
Ordinance number 2728 passes.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We will move to council updates, moving right along. Why don't we start with Chief Belcher?
The only thing that I have is that we have a CPAC meeting Monday, March 28th, 7 p.m. at the Justice Center.
City clerk, Sharon Rose.
nothing for me tonight.
Thank you. Finance director, Matt Wolf. City administrator, finance tonight. City attorney, Ryan Nate. Okay. City administrator,
Nothing for me.
okay. Utilities director, Councilor Garcia.
Nothing tonight.
Okay. Parks and Rec.
Nothing tonight.
All right, Dave, you're gonna mess this up, aren't you?
Just Dave.
Well, we've got this trip that we're planning. No, we have Planning Commission coming up on Monday, March 28th, also at 7 p.m. here in the council chamber. So we do have a pretty full agenda for that evening.
Yeah, there's There's some interesting things on the agenda.
Several items. We do have a couple of items having to do with phasing of Prairie Trace over on the other side of the interstate. Cypress Creek, their first phase is coming in for review. And then the University Park apartments that are up near 167th and White. So.
Public Works?
Nothing tonight.
All right. Councilwoman Dean,
Nothing tonight.
about Council Vice President.
Well, I think we'll be discussing the thing that you were gonna bring up, so I'm gonna say we have nothing right now.
Councilman Potter.
Nothing.
Council President Baldwin.
Nothing at this time.
Councilman Roberts, I saved you for.
Oh, good. I have, let's see, I have about 4 things.
Oh boy.
Okay, so I'm gonna just start with maybe the least first. So, are we gonna have the big item pickup this year? Have we discussed it? Is it in the budget? Do we have dates?
Large item pickup.
Yeah.
I don't think we've discussed that yet.
We have not.
So I know last year we had some discussion, and you know, with what we could pick up, et cetera, we had to get bids, and then you brought it to us, and then we asked more questions, and I think we had to refigure it. So I didn't know if we're gonna do it, if we need to maybe start earlier this year, and maybe we're still too late. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll bring that back next meeting.
Okay.
We need to take a look at it because some of the assumptions we made last year were low.
Right.
No, were high.
Well,
So
yeah.
we paid a lot for a lot less to be picked up.
Okay.
Be good to look at.
How are the ordinance reviews going? I know I brought it up when we talked about the snow removal, that we had the ordinance for 5+ years, that we didn't, you know, backtrack to make sure we're following it. And I mentioned that at the time, we should do that. Have we started this process? What's going on? Are there any updates?
So I know we had this discussion before.
Right,
So you're talking about just going through.
right. Like when we vote on an ordinance,
Right.
I suggested, is there a time frame, like after 60 days, we make sure that we've enacted it or we're working towards getting things enacted? I thought the consensus was by staff that this was gonna be done, so I just wanted to know what's going on.
I haven't put anything in motion. Most of the
Okay.
ordinances that we have are in the city code.
Okay,
So those aren't changed very often. And then we adopt the League of Kansas Municipalities.
it's
So-
just,
So if it's
I guess
something
going
like-
forward, if it's ones, like changing the rules for snow ordinance, we
we
need to make
flag it.
sure, yeah, we need to
Yeah.
flag it and then go back to it. And I didn't know if we'd had any of those, or had you started the process, or what, I hadn't heard any updates, so.
I think that we just had an ordinance for all the municipal court processes that came. That was actually as a result of, I'm assuming an ordinance review, was it not?
That was
So-
on that, but, I mean, we
That's
have
correct.
many ordinances.
Oh, of course we do. I
Right,
mean, we
so-
can't just
Yeah.
hit them all at once either.
Right,
Yeah,
no,
we
I
have.
know that.
I haven't flagged anything
Okay.
to date.
The third one is, just today I had a citizen that lives on Parma Way, this might be for the chief. He said that people are driving very fast on that, and that's between Moonlight and, where does that end? Over by the park. What is that? Is that White Drive?
Yeah, we-
Yeah. Like very fast. And I think when I saw the signs today, it says it's posted 25 miles an hour, and it says children at play on the sign. But I don't know if we can increase signs and police presence. He suggested a speed bump, and I didn't think that was that we could do that, but.
Yeah,
he
we
said I
can
could bring
certainly
it
get
up.
some people in the area.
Okay.
I used to live over in that area, so I'm familiar with it. And
Yeah.
the signs are pretty visible, but it's certainly something we can
I know,
get.
because it's
get some-
wider there, and I don't know.
It's
he says-
wider, but a lot of cars
Right.
park on
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah.
I live in that neighborhood.
And that's
so
why I think he was concerned, because
Yeah.
of all that.
the cars parking, but I will tell you, I was out working in my yard this weekend. I think we saw 4 separate officers go by. There's a pretty good police presence
Okay.
out there. It's just tough to catch them. It's a short.
And part of our
area.
presence over there too is, we do a lot of activity over at the park. Not that there's anything
Right.
bad, but,
Just
we'll have community policing opportunities over there
Yep.
with kids. So
Okay.
it's, we do have a presence, but we can certainly add that to the
Okay. And then lastly, I had 3 people in the last 2 weeks ask me about if we could revisit the ATV or the golf carts on public streets. I texted the mayor to see if we could get it on the agenda, and he said to bring it up as council updates, and that potentially Chief Belcher would have a report for us. It sounds like Edgerton and Spring Hill are allowing it, or they're in the works of allowing it. And I didn't know if you had any more information based on my discussion with Todd, and if it was something we could revisit, et cetera.
Well, anything that like that you guys want to do is going to be, a governing body decision.
Right.
My stance is not going to change from the last time. Is that I think it's very dangerous and it's not worth. There has to be a concern for public safety for two reasons. Is why I say this. One, these vehicles, the manufacturers say these vehicles are not intended for use on city streets, and two, these vehicles are not equipped safety-wise, rating-wise, that if they come into a collision with a motor vehicle, that's just not going to work out very good for the passengers of that vehicle. Those are my two main reasons why. We did take a snapshot, gosh, I want to say it was a year ago maybe, or maybe not quite a year ago, of it, and came up with, who's doing what and how they're doing it. And there were a lot of logistics in that as well to get that accomplished. But from my standpoint, I kept coming back to the safety aspect of it. And for every person that you have, in my opinion, that's going to be compliant with jumping through whatever hoops that we have to do, there's probably going to be at least double that many that are going to say, oh, we can drive them on the street, and off we go. And there's a lot of limitations too with 56 highway. So, but it's a governing body decision. I just want to, tell you what my personal opinion is.
I agree. I think it's a horrible idea. The communities I've lived in that allow golf carts are designed to allow golf carts. We're not Sun City, we're not the villages, and I think it would just be a horrible idea, frankly.
My issue with it is they're not allowed, or they're not required to have insurance. So if they were to cause a collision on the road, say with my vehicle, they have no insurance to cover damage done to me or my family. That would all come back on me. So if they're not required to have auto insurance to run the vehicle, and then if we don't allow it on our greenway, but we do on our streets, I think that we're going to see a lot of people using the greenway to get to the streets, and then that could create an issue for pedestrian safety on the greenway.
Mark, did you have anything?
Nothing that hasn't really been stated. I think those are all valid concerns. Casey's absolutely right on the insurance. I don't know if maybe homeowners would cover it in that case since it's personal property, but I'm guessing to Chief Belcher's point, we'd have to add some pretty involved requirements to justify that. And I don't know. I guess I'd be willing to look at what that all entails, but I don't think it's probably going to pan out in the end.
Well, that sounds like there's a consensus, but I mean, personally, just because you make something legal to drive on the street doesn't make it street legal. You'd have to put like some sort of indicators on the vehicle. You'd have to have like lights and things like that. I don't know how many golf carts are equipped with that kind of stuff. I know ATVs, some of them are, but not all. So, there's a significant safety component here that I'd be hard pressed to overlook.
Can I add something?
Yes. Absolutely, Mark.
So what I would think, if we even entertain this, we would have certain restrictions off the top, like you can never be on 56 highway because that's federal highway. We've got issues there. And you could just off the top say nothing after certain hours, which could be dark, so that you don't have to require lights. Just like, your vehicle right now, you're not required to have lights until it's dark. And you're not required to have turn signals because you have your arm sticking out the window if you need to. But it would be nice to look at, well, we should have turn signals and those type of things to see what they would really entail to do a good job.
Okay, sounds like no consensus,
yeah,
but three people asked me, so I said I'd bring it up.
And I've heard it before too. Yeah.
And I don't think, like in most people's head it's, to get to my neighbor's house, or, just stay in the cul-de-sac type area. But then when you think about it, if you allow it, and how
wanted to go over some stuff regarding Edgerton and safety concerns in our community. And I had emailed some correspondence I've had with Mayor Roberts, just a couple things. And before I proceeded further, I just wanted to get council's opinion and approval on everything moving forward. But Edgerton has expressed concerns about 191st and I-35, which is in Gardner. They've expressed concerns about our safety. And so much so that they commissioned a traffic study on that area, which I've also sent out to you, which recommended, among other things, several things, but among other things, to close the entrance to the Phillips 66, to not allow turns and not allow cut-throughs to the station there. And if that didn't do the trick, and or shut down 191st Street on their end to not allow traffic. So, I guess my question would be, why are they so concerned with, it seems odd they're so concerned with our intersection in Gardner. And so, looking back, I passed out minutes from one of their meetings. This was, I believe, 9/9 meeting. And I just wanted to read a few of the highlights, and this is one of their council meetings. It started with a councilman brought up and said, Gardner Road and I-35, with all of this traffic, it takes half an hour to go through the intersection. He's heard complaints from Gardner as well as safety concerns. So right there, I think it's kind of odd that they bring that up at their council meeting. But it goes on to say, Councilmember Brown inquired if cul-de-sacs could be constructed on 191st Street at the Edgerton city limits. He's not sure if it could be done, but it would eliminate a lot of traffic in that area. Councilmember Lewis agreed, and it would force people who work in LPKC to stay in Edgerton to get lunch. Councilmember Brown agreed and said it would funnel the employees at LPKC to the new restaurants. So right there, I think I see the ultimate end game. Again, it's just my opinion, but it seems to me like they're concerned more with keeping their employees in their community and not coming in our community.
Mayor,
Yes.
may I mention that 9/9/21 is also about 2 weeks, I believe, after construction started on the trip. I believe it happened right around that time period.
Yeah.
I just want to say that for the record.
So
You're very skeptical.
Oh, no, I am very skeptical.
yeah, so you can read the rest of that. So they did commission a traffic study, and again, I've passed that out. And if you dig into it, there's a lot of fancy terms, a lot of numbers thrown out there. But I think several of the conclusions they were arrived at were questionable at best, and really kind of reaching, to be honest. And to top all that off, the study was done by Renaissance Infrastructure Consulting firm, and the founder and president of that is Chip Corcoran, and Chip Corcoran is the chairman of Elevate Edgerton. That was really interesting. At the very least, that's a conflict of interest in my opinion.
Total conflict of interest.
I would say.
Yeah. So, and because Elevate Edgerton is their economic development group for that area. So
Now let me ask this, if I may. The city administrator and I talked about this a month ago, I think. And I went through the report then, went through it again today. I didn't, and maybe I just don't speak engineer, but I didn't see anything in there that was a hard and fast, this should be done for these reasons. They cite, 9 accidents at that intersection over the course of 3 years.
Oh, actually 2 at the Phillips 66 that they're concerned
There's
about.
2 there?
The others primarily had to do with 191st Street when it was open. We closed that off,
Right.
directed traffic to another location.
So it's really not that intersection.
Yeah,
Not more.
And I'll point out that the study was done while one lane in each direction was closed. So they base everything on assumptions which are flawed because they couldn't observe. And there's actually a lack of activity that they observed. they didn't observe a pattern of behavior because they were there for such a short time.
Is what,
I mean,
30
part of the
minutes
study
one
was
morning?
part of the study was done with the drone video.
That's right.
So
30 minutes.
the whole thing just lacks credibility. I mean, the assumptions they make aren't credible because the road wasn't done, the improvements weren't done. So it's, you know, even the grading of the intersections and the entrance for Phillips 66 is based on a flawed assumption.
Well, and I don't know if anybody else does, but I kind of take an issue with them doing a traffic study in our town.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Like,
Yeah,
my-
it's interesting how they were able to spend money on a traffic issue that's in the city limits of Gardner.
all 6 intersections that they, in their study area, are in the city of Gardner.
Yes.
Like, we don't go to other cities and do traffic studies.
They also didn't look at the impact of closing the road because closing the road would increase traffic across the bridge in front of Nike. So it's my belief no independent consultant would have ever reached a conclusion that 191st need to be closed. 191st is a major public safety corridor, and both the sheriff's office and Fire District 1 are vehemently against closing that road.
Well, that was the biggest concern I had too, is you close that off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a longer trip for first responders to get to the further.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting because I believe that a couple of years ago, when we were discussing safety issues on our end with Edgerton, because there were trucks that were trying to turn left on 191st Street right off the interstate and clogging 2 lanes of traffic at the time, that they were vehemently against closing 191st Street at that moment because it was within a mile of the interstate network and governed by federal law. So now they're looking to do the exact same thing now. I don't think I don't think that they have a leg to stand on here, and I think that if this were to happen, we would be fighting them every step of the way.
What's our recourse?
We would probably have to go to KDOT, and then probably the DOT.
We have taken some steps to try to mitigate the drive-through traffic. So there's a meeting tomorrow with the owners of Phillips 66. We're looking at ways to slow traffic, signage that will indicate that it's illegal to do so, and the fine that's involved. So we're working with them to try to mitigate the drive-through.
We've already got a patrol over there already, don't we? That's watching trucks trying to go through there.
Yeah, we hit that area, that corridor regularly.
Yeah.
Not only with just CVSA patrol, but just normal patrol activities.
Exactly. And I've also seen sheriff's deputies out there too, so I know it's getting a lot of visibility.
Keep in mind the left turn that they were most concerned with off Gardner Road, that was the only lane for northbound traffic. So yes, anybody trying to make a left turn was stopping traffic that backed up on the ramp because there was no other lane to traverse that area.
And there was an issue with Google Maps for a short period of time that we have sent notification and has been corrected about using that Phillips 66 as a through lane. That's been taken care of.
Correct.
For the last 3 weeks, when I've been looking at that road, and I live on that part of town, so I see it a lot. Every truck that I've seen go up there has gone up to 188th Street and turned left. I've not seen any trucks going in there except to use potentially the truck wash. Some of them park their rigs there.
I noticed the same thing actually.
Yeah, but they're not driving just straight through. I think that employees might be doing that more than anybody else, and they're typically running late for their shift, and so they'll just race through that area there. But I don't think trucks are doing it.
But there is clear line of sight in each direction coming out of Phillips 66, so it's not like you're pulling out in front of somebody. I mean, I've watched it more than they watched it for the study over the last couple of weeks. I mean, there is cut-through traffic, but nothing that would come close to justifying closing that road.
I've used that exit for almost 3 years and I can't think of an accident I've seen there.
Yeah. This is all about quick trip, 100%.
It's- yeah.
Mark, did you have anything to add to this?
So everybody's kind of said what I was going to say, but I did want to point out that on the study, section 4.1 purposely leaves off the results of the Locust Street intersection improvement. So not only was this ill-timed to do the study, but all the results that I found in there, where they're talking about level D service and the cut-through, will be mitigated between our current improvements and everything else that's happening with KDOT that's already been laid out in our last few meetings. So I don't see any issue that was presented in this study that's actually of concern that we need to be considering closing 191st Street.
Sound good? I just want a consensus, before I proceed it further.
I mean, it would be nice if we could work together.
Absolutely.
However, it seems like there's some ulterior motives of them wanting to close that, in my opinion.
Well, the other piece of this is that we have to be prepared for them to engage in unilateral action. And I don't know if that's going to happen, but they may try to do that. So we've got to have a plan.
Well, where it was left off was, you know, he wanted to get together with our public works and engineers and discuss ways that we can improve our intersection in Gardner. The way I left it is I would talk with council, but I think we will take action as Gardner. I don't think we need to, get together and meet to discuss it.
I mean, if they're gonna be making decisions on our intersections, shouldn't they just be combined with our city council?
Well, I can tell you that Kellen, the Public Works Director from Edgerton, and the Public Works Director from the county have been meeting for a couple months just so that we can take the politics and the past out of these discussions. And they've done great work. I mean, they really get along well. They look at it from an engineering perspective, and I think we continue down that path. I mean, Kellen can talk to him about what we're doing and see if there's any input that they want to provide.
Anything else? Any other questions, comments? Okay, I think that is everything. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion Deaton, second Van Potter. All's in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Sorry, Mark. Be in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All opposed?
In favor.
Thank you, everyone.